It's Vic Stops Focus. Steve Shaw sounding like he just found a $2,000 upsell hidden in the trunk liner. Dave Rogers sounding like he's already spent it. Let's go.
Welcome back, Dave. What's on
Hey,
your mind today?
hey, Steve, how the hell you doing?
Man, I am awesome today.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking about it, and we were talking last time or one of the times about promise times, and I was thinking old school. When I got done with that episode, I was just thinking old school, and maybe it's time to bring back some of the stuff we used to do, like crazy stuff, like introduction to service from sales,
Oh my
setting the
gosh.
first appointment. You know, Novel concept is when a customer's done, how about setting their next appointment like the dentist does every single time? I know.
Yeah, exactly,
Whoa.
exactly.
Whoa,
Wow.
that's crazy. So, yeah, I was thinking about that after we talked, and I was like, maybe we should start focusing on some of these things that as a reminder, because what were you saying that, 5, 6 years ago it was a buzzword, right?
Oh my
When
gosh, yeah. It was probably pre-COVID, whatever year that was, 15, 16. I can remember working with dealers myself as a trainer. It's like, oh my God, how important is this? We've got to do the service department introduction and, walk the customer. And everybody had the count. Everybody had all this stuff set up. And then remember, like even some of the dealerships had the service manager mannequin, they
yeah,
got the 6 foot tall Steve Shaw cardboard cutout somewhere, like this is going to be your service advisor, that was for after hours. That was the after hours
yeah,
thing is, and there's a little thing that was, like an appointment thing on the guy's shirt and he had to sign, like people did crazy shit like that back
yeah.
in those days because that's how important it was to have that service department walk or intro. And it's not even a thing anymore as far as I know.
It's funny because I think that what's happened is I go back to my drinking the Kool-Aid from the factory is, you got a light on your dash that's going to tell you when to bring the car in for an oil change, which is
Right.
as we talked about, probably not enough is, it's 6 months, it's 5,000 miles, 6,000 miles, 5 months, 6 months, pick the number that works for you and the customer. But,
Hmm.
and I think we've taken the path of least resistance. I think it gave people the excuse not to do that. Um, you bring your car in a year, you bring the car when the light comes on. It's just one less step, and it's laziness is what it is. And for me, it's a signal that we don't want the business. You know,
Yeah.
so if I sell you a car today, and let's be honest, car dealerships aren't open the same hours most of them aren't open the same hours they were before COVID, right?
Right.
We were all shutting down early at COVID. We were doing this stuff. Now you can't get anybody to work past 8 o'clock. 7, 8 o'clock is a lot of dealerships. So there's probably somebody back in service every time you're selling a car, at least 90% of the time nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, so there's no excuse. Walk them in the back, introduce them to an advisor, do the presumptive close even before you sell them the car. This is where after you buy the car, this is where you're going to bring it for service. Oh, look, our Top Gun, Steve Shaw's here. He's not busy right now. Steve, I'd like to introduce you to Dave Rogers here. He looks like to buy a car,
Yeah.
or bought a car, you know, how many miles you do a year, whatever it is, and then set the guy's first appointment. And we have
That's
the
smart.
technology now with, I'll just say CDK and there's a little in CDK service, there's a little button right on the screen that says set first appointment. And it defaults. Yeah, we have it set up in our stores and it defaults to 180 days. So it's Monday. It'll do default 180 days out on a Monday. And same with the set next appointment. When you have a customer
Yeah.
ROs open and stuff, there's a little button for that too. But it's not complicated. But I think everyone's just taking the path of least resistance once again, and they're drinking the Kool-Aid, to tell you that you can bring the car in after a year when the idiot light comes on to tell you that your oils due. Um, and I think that's probably why the fad went away because somebody found a reason not to do it.
Yeah, I don't know why it stopped. Maybe it was COVID. Maybe it was walking back to the shop. I'm not sure. But I can't remember the last time we talked about it. It's
Yeah.
probably in one of our value-based classes. We might talk about that when we write out processes or we talk about process A to Z. Where does the first, where does it start? It starts at the sale.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see it there. I mean, yeah, there's a handful of people out there. So don't people in the comments don't kill us. But
Yeah.
there's a handful of people that are doing it. But most people are not doing it, and I've had guys say, "Don't do it." I've had guys say, "Don't make the next appointment." You know why? Well, we don't know. We don't know when they're gonna come in, and then I'm
Right.
like, but that's what the isn't that what our phone process is for? So that we get them in the system and we print out a call log 3 days in advance or however many days in advance, and we start working that to make sure, I mean, to me, that's one of the best things you can do to ensure my business. And especially if I'm a new service advisor, I'd want to collect all of those people as my
Exactly.
customer. So 6 months from now, I got business, and then I'm going to reschedule that appointment.
Right.
So I got my next bit right. So I'm going to, like getting subscribers, it continues to go up and up and up. And 3 years from now, I never have to do that again.
Right. No, it makes, I mean, you go to the dentist, you get your teeth cleaned, the checkup on there. It's covered by your insurance, right? Generally speaking, whatever it is, 50, 60, $70 visit. And they set the next appointment for you before you leave. And for me, it's always 6 months down the road. That's what they set the appointment for. I
Yeah.
went into a
Nobody wants
derm.
to go to the dentist, but the
No.
dentist seems to be that dental assistant or whatever they're called these days.
Yeah.
He or she seems to be pretty darn good at making those appointments.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, no one's going back for a second visit. I promise you.
No, and all the medical fields have been doing it. I noticed that, primary care guys doing it, set it out a year.
Yeah.
Uh, Went to a dermatologist, they check you for skin cancer, whatever. They schedule you for 1 year out. I don't understand why we wouldn't do that for basic maintenance on a vehicle.
Yeah.
You know, if the customer comes in and they have 20,000 miles on a car and the car's 2 years old, you don't have to be a math scientist, a math scholar to figure out that the guy's doing whatever, 10,000 miles a year, right? It's
Right.
not hard to figure out. Okay, let me
Yeah.
set the appointment for 6 months, 5,000 miles, and we'll get 2 oil changes in, or whatever the numbers are. Um, and I think it's just laziness is what it is. And I think, or we're not staffed to handle it. It's the path of least resistance seems to be the biggest thing for me that I see people doing.
Probably the path of least resistance. I think, yeah, it sometimes it baffles me why the things that we do and the things that we, that don't do. And then I guess there's things that we think that we are doing, but
Yeah,
we're not doing really any of it. And then I always say in my classes, I always say, how many of your customers know the year, make, model, mileage of their car when they come in?
right,
And it used to be a customer may not know their mileage, right? I don't know if I've got 36,000 or 38,000. I'm following the light, right? Sometimes people don't even know what year car they have, you
right,
know?
right,
And so because we've conditioned them just exactly what you said. We'll take care of everything. The sales department says we'll take care of everything, and we don't.
right,
And then you get into the Dave rant of the customer didn't show up for an oil, they missed an oil change or they missed
right.
something, and it just whatever what they call it. They used to call it the waterfall chart when I was in the business. The the retention, it just would fall off
Oh, yeah.
at a
Yeah,
certain
we used to
mileage.
fall right off. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think I think, if you're paying attention to what's out, social media, podcasts, whatever the case may be, um, retention's been the big buzzword, I'd say for the last year, in the automobile business. Which is crazy because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we've been talking about for 30 years to retain customers, get them come back twice a year, 3 times a year, whatever it was at the time. The whole idea I used to, that was drilled into my head was, I want to be the dealership with the most customers in my database. You know, you
yeah.
know. So we used to, you broke down, we wanted to write you up. You needed an oil change, we wrote you up. No matter what it was, we brought you in, we wrote you up, we got your information. Because I always figured you could market to them during slow times, right? Um, so right, and that's always been the key with retention. That's the thing. So um, when you listen to people out there talking about like it's a newfangled thing, it cracks me up. But what's the best way to keep a customer tied in? Schedule their next appointment. They're
Schedule a next appointment.
they're
Absolutely.
gonna get a reminder. Your system should be set up to send a reminder out a week ahead of time. The system should be set up to remind them 2 days out. The system should be set up to let everybody know that they missed an appointment. That's the other thing back to old school. I was talking to one of my service managers the other day, and I happened to be looking in the appointment screen while we were chit-chatting. We're at one of our weekly meetings. And I'm like, who is the person that calls these 19 no-shows? And he just like
What?
looked at me. As I was like, who's the person that calls these 19 no-shows? I'm looking at his appointment system. And he's like
Right,
looking
right,
at me.
right.
And I'm like, I said, your cashier sits there all day long and doesn't do anything. Can't she call these people? Yeah. Well, doesn't a sister email? Doesn't it text out? All that stuff. Again, it's basics. It's old school, but again, if somebody misses their appointment, why aren't you on the phone with them
Well,
instantly?
yeah, well, yeah, and then you got to ask yourself, okay, they missed their appointment, but why did they miss their appointment? Because we didn't call them the day before, and we
Right,
didn't call them 3 days before. We talk about that all the time. What is your and it doesn't even require a phone call at this point in life. It could be the text message reminder, the email reminder. We do have tools that will allow us to get those reminders out to a customer to make sure, or to reschedule their appointment. I'm a fan. I mean, I love the old school stuff, but there's certain things that I really like new school, which is like you get the calendar event, and then if something comes up, hey, reschedule. Can you
right,
reschedule? Okay, great.
right.
And if I think about that as a service manager situation, I've got a shop to load, and I think that should, now we're talking old school. Load your shop appropriately.
Right.
I think you broke it down once about how many cars to bring in and so on. So I've got to have a certain amount of cars that are going to show up in my shop. If my men are going to flag hours tomorrow, if my men are going to flag those hours, I've got to be able to have enough cars for them to work on. So it does fall back on me to make sure that I have enough cars showing up in my store that we can produce. We can end up making our budget, because every one of those cars that misses, unless we're lucky enough to have an overabundance of cars, which I'm not saying so sure that that's the case
It's
today.
not. Right.
We need those cars to show up.
Well, that's the thing is I find it, it's absurd that we wouldn't be. I learned in the body shop business, and a good friend of mine's in there, and the first thing he said was, "Get the keys. You don't make any money unless you get the keys, right? That's the body shop business." And I think the same thing goes in service. You got to get the keys. You got to get the customer in the door. We're not going to make money on anything if we don't get the car in the door. So,
Yeah, I
I
love the idea that I remember that, get the keys, right? Write the
get
estimate,
the
get the
keys.
keys,
Get
leave
the
your car
keys,
right
right?
here. Because
Yeah,
if you allow the customers to leave, they're going to go somewhere. They're going to go somewhere else.
right.
That's
And again,
absolutely the case.
so,
Absolutely.
again, you're looking at, set their first appointment to make sure that you got them in the first time. Obviously, it's, to get the customer back, set their next appointment, let them know, A, you want their business. B, I'm looking out for you. Well, Steve, why do I have to make an appointment in 6 months? I was told that, I read somewhere you have to wait till the light comes on. Well, Steve, you don't want to do that. Don't you want to keep this car? Let's talk about maintenance. Let's talk about, you know what I mean? Like, that light is set up that means it's too late. We got to get you in before that. And to your point, which I think is important, is using the new technology. So we have data mining tools that go through the database. They remind people if they're due for appointment. They go through the appointments. They remind people that their appointment is due. If the customer needs to change or cancel, whatever, that AI and that data mining tool can actually integrate. Can chit chat with you. But you got to be the one that maybe help it out or monitor it, make sure that there's a complete follow up. Because if a customer says cancel, who's chasing that 2 or 3 days later to reschedule it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
where I think fall
we
short.
will walk you through that in classes too, because I mean, whether it's the BDC's responsibility, the cashier's, it's ultimately that service manager's
Yes.
responsibility
Right.
to make, and talk about old school. Growing up in the days when we didn't have enough business, right? We fought for every appointment that we
Right.
had to get in the store. We fought for those things, and I know as a manager that was the biggest thing, is I got to fill up my shop, and so that old school was everything fell back on me as the manager. There was nobody else. There
Right.
was nobody else that because I couldn't go to my dealer and say, "Well, the cashier didn't call. Who does she work for?" Well, the we didn't we didn't have that stuff back then. So I
Right.
might have been on the phone, calling customers at the time because I had to fill up my shop. And I never had this pay plan that was so lucrative that I was making the money that I wanted to make, or if I ever got the money I was wanting, I can guarantee you I wanted to make a dollar more, and so every appointment made a difference to get every single car in here, every single car that you possibly can. So old school, it was my responsibility.
Right. And again, when you grew and you get a bigger store and, now you got to dump it on your individual advisors. It should be their job. Primarily, it should be their job to try to call the customer to get them back in, reschedule, whatever the case may be, right? If they don't show up,
Yep.
make their next appointment. I think too many times I've seen where, advisors, when they have a BDC, they don't even make appointments anymore. It's like beneath them, They don't answer the phones. Now they don't make an appointment, right? And they'll transfer the call to the BDC, which is stupid, right? You're trying to build a relationship with a customer. You're trying to be their guy like, right? Isn't that what you always want to be? Their guy to service the car,
Yeah.
or gal to service the car, or whatever. And then, oh, I want to make an appointment here. Hold on, let me transfer you to my BDC. No, make the damn
Well, how about
appointment. What does it take? 2 seconds?
yeah, and then these guys that have these BDCs, I mean, you have them. I was with a group just recently that's got them, and then the advisor doesn't make the appointment. They shuffle it off to the BDC, and then the advisor's like, "Well, I'm not gonna make my status call now. I'm not gonna," and they stop making their status calls,
Right.
and everything gets shoved over to the BDC. And then what does the advisor do? The BDC sucks. Our BDC stinks. They
Right.
don't do what all they do is take appointments. They don't do the 50K or the 30K. They don't do this. And and you look at half the calls that go to the BDC now are for status calls because the
Right.
advisor didn't do that either. And so, holy cow, a whole nother rant that could get into. But
Oh,
we shuffle the responsibility over there. Now we're mad because then we say the BDC stinks, but the BDCs, all they do is sit there and just fight for their lives all day long and try to put an appointment on the desk. And so absolutely it's like this, it's like a snowball effect. If we would just get back to, and I think this is one of the conversations we have all the time, is if you were good at the basics, would you be an amazing dealership? Would you be a great
absolutely.
dealership?
You would be.
And that's what I think we forget is, oh, and let's go to the convention and let's find some AI tools, let's find this tool, let's find that tool. Great. What did that do for you? Were you, how about if we were really, really good? A guy stopped me in class and was having this whole conversation with me about, which tool is better, which tool is better for this, which tool is better. And I said, none of them. I don't want you to get any tool. I don't want you to change any tool. I don't want you to do anything. I want to know, did you write down your process? Do you have your process written down? And do you have a great process? Because they were complaining between the differences between X time and
Right.
dealer logics, or
Right.
the other great
CDK,
multi-point,
Smart Wins,
whatever tool
Reynolds
it
and
is.
Reynolds. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, right? I don't care what tool. I don't care what tool. I don't care what DMS or what you have. You can design a process that works around any of them. And if you're in a group like yourself, or even in a small store, ain't none of us going to change the equipment. We're not going to change the DMS, or we're not going to change X time, and the amount of time that it would take to go through and change X time to something else, or change dealer lot, or whatever it is. Um, all we had to do was go back and look at what's the process, and then let's write our process around the tool that we have. And next thing you know, you got a great tool.
Well, I mean, I would say, to add to that is, what tool, the one you're going to use, right? You know, I mean, really, if you just think about it as a tool, right? If I need a screwdriver for a job that I'm going to do next, but all I have in my hand is a hammer, I'm probably not going to get the job done very well, right? So,
Right.
if I give you X time, if I give you CDK service, if I give you Reynolds or Reynolds, it doesn't matter. If I give you my Karma, I don't care which one I give you. If you don't utilize it, you're wasting money and you're wasting time. So, but I do believe that you have to go back. You gotta have the basics, you gotta have the fundamentals in. I think a lot of times we talked about it once or twice before. I've always believed that, if you don't have a really good process in place, technology is just going to report how much you suck. That's all it's going to do. It's not going to make the process better, because if you can't follow a manual process, as I've always said, if you can't do it analog, you're not going to do it digital. It's just not going to happen, right?
No
So
question about it.
so you have to be, you got to be, the steward of the process. You got to make sure everyone's following it. And, I could go, you mentioned BDCs. We could do a whole podcast on what to do and what not to do and what to watch out for when you set up a BDC, because yeah, I've seen advisors do some crazy stuff. When you take away their job and you give it to someone else to do appointments, all of a sudden it's amazing how the guys that sucked at making appointments, and I say sucked at it, all of a sudden now become experts on appointment making, right? So they couldn't make their own appointments, so we sublet it, or we gave it to a BDC, and now all of a sudden they're experts. Well, that appointment was made at the wrong time, or we can't do that job on a Tuesday. All of a sudden now they're experts on it, and you have to laugh at it, because it's just BS that they're making excuses. So,
Well, how about
yeah,
this? How about this? Now, this is going way back, to my days as a service manager, working at one of the publics, right? We had a budget, right? I got a budget that I can live within for service about compensation. I got a budget for support staff, and I got a budget for for me, right? So
Yep.
what management and all that stuff gets paid, and so we're paying our advisors X, right? So we're within budget, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, um, we're going to hire somebody to take appointments. Well, where does that fit into the budget? So now,
Right.
who my support staff was maybe a valet and a warranty administrator. So now you're going to make me put in an appointment coordinator. So where
Right.
does that money come from? Oh, I guess you know what? Since I'm going to take it away from your job, I guess that's going to come out of your pay. So now, as an advisor, you're not making X
Right.
percent. You should make less. Well, no, it doesn't really work that well, doesn't it? You
It's
know,
never has. Yeah.
it's a crazy vicious cycle, and bottom line is at some point everybody has a budget, and we got to make those three compensation lines.
Yeah.
They got to work, and so I guess that's why everybody says, well, let's go to AI, let's go to this. But where's that's going to go now? Go into tools and supplies, or a different comp line.
Yeah, well, the AI is gonna go to outside services or data services or something. It's gonna go there.
Right.
It's not gonna go into personnel. That's why people sublet things. They sublet it, and I've seen that for even in the publics. You sublet it, and it takes it out of. Now you don't have your personnel expense, but your outside services went up. And
Yeah. So now you
yeah,
can't train. Now you can't hire
right
Steve
now
because you
you
got
can't
another
hire. Right now
something
you
else
can't you
announced.
can't do anything you want to do. But I do think that when you talk about that, and you talk about um, the advisors and stuff. Now they never go backwards. They still, you take away the job from them. The job used to pay 45 grand a year, whatever, back then. You had to
Oh,
answer the
shit.
phone, you wrote up your ROs, you billed out the ROs, you cashiered the customer. Hell, sometimes you wind up putting ROs back in the Reynolds and Reynolds color file that was behind you, right? You
Yeah,
wind up putting the
exactly.
files back, right? You wind up doing that. Um, and obviously, listen, they make a good living. They make 80, 90, $100,000. But we took the phones away from them. They don't have to deliver cars. You got a cashier that does this. Some of this stuff is just crazy if you think about it, what we're paying them for. But yeah, like
You want
the setting the appointment and scheduling the appointment, I do think they should take more of an ownership of it. They should be thrilled that a customer comes back, a new car customer. Glad to have you in the family. Congratulations. What color's that car? Talk about something stupid just to get him
yeah.
excited, right? Um, and then, to be glad to take that first appointment. You shouldn't be. And if you're tied up, then the guy next to you should take that appointment, or the gal next to you should take. Somebody should look at that customer. They walk in and, not have their head down, hiding behind the keyboard or the screen. So, I
Well,
think it's important.
we've weaved a long way from I don't even know what the topic was when we started here.
Old school, old
Service
school.
introductions, I guess, old school, that
Yeah.
should be the title,
I was
right?
just circling back around on that. So that's kind of where I was going.
Yeah,
You know.
we circled around to a lot of stuff
Yeah.
here. Probably ought to wrap it up about that on about that note, so
Yeah, it's fun.
what's your
Yeah,
what's your
listen,
GM tip of the day, old school?
GM, yeah, don't put a digital tool in until you get the basics done. I
Damn.
mean, again, evaluate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, you're the GM, you set the culture, you set the procedures. You should make sure your sales department is introducing the service department, that every customer gets introduced. If you sell the car when they're closed, there should be some kind of handoff process to make sure that customer information gets back in the back. And then, set an appointment for 6 months down the road. I don't care what brand you're with. I don't care what make it is. I don't care who pays for what maintenance. Set it for 6 months, get them in the door, and start that long-term process. So, that's where
Absolutely.
it starts up front, and the service manager can't make the sales department do anything, but the general manager can make it all happen. So
Awesome. Well, you general managers, please remember that. You have the power.
you have the power.
All right, all right. Well, let's get out of here on that note. Look forward to catching up to you again soon.
All right, bro. I'll talk to you later.
Warning, Fixed Ops Focus has been known to trigger explosive menu penetration, turbocharged RO averages, and uncontrollable team buy-in. Like and subscribe across all platforms immediately or face severe symptoms including advisor vanishing acts, service manager burnout, and general manager visions of red P&L nightmares. May cause irreversible I told you so moments.